Hello and welcome to Photographic Connections, the podcast where we create connection to self, nature and others through the art of photography. My name is Kim Grant, the founder of Photographic Connections and your host for this podcast. And today I'm absolutely delighted to welcome Adrian Beasley onto the podcast. Adrian is an Adobe certified expert with a real love for editing and printing images. We talk about the experience of printing images, the joys of bringing people together to create through photography, the incredible power of black and white imagery, and supporting people to work out what they're naturally good at. So without further ado, please join me in welcoming Adrian Beasley. Hi Adrian, thank you so much for agreeing to come onto the podcast this week. It's an absolute delight to reconnect with you because we met last year in the Scottish Highlands at the Creative Light Festival and I had such a joy getting to know you and spending time with you up there. And there's so many principles around your photography and your love particularly for editing and printing that I'd love to speak to you about today because I feel you've got a lot of knowledge and experience in these areas, and I feel like a lot of your philosophy as well around your photography and why you do what you do will be of great inspiration and benefit to those listening. But before we delve into those areas, like I do with all my guests, it would be great if you could go back to the beginning of your photography journey and just tell the story of what got you into photography in the first place.
Oh, wow. Yeah. Like many people I hear that it started a long time ago in a far, far distant galaxy or whatever. I suppose, at school. And I came across a friend whose father, I think, was doing black and white developing and printing in the kitchen. And I went along to his house, he showed us what they did, and I was absolutely amazed by it. And at that moment, I thought, oh, this is something I need to do. So it took a while before I could get a camera of my own. But I started to play with it, and we used the darkroom at the school, and I just loved that whole process. Then life got in the way, and photography kind of took a bit of a back seat for a while. And it wasn't until I started playing in a band, and I thought, oh, it'd be good fun to kind of record our progress as a band. And I bought a camera at that point, a film DSLR, thinking that would make nice pictures. And of course, my photography got worse when I did that. Everything was much worse than the compact camera I had at the time. So I got hooked into City and Guilds. I thought I need to go and learn how to do this stuff. So I joined the local college, City and Guilds, and from there sort of learned, as at that time were modules. So I did a darkroom module, which I absolutely loved, and then did various modules like landscape and buildings and so on. And that connected me to a whole bunch of things I'm doing now. But part of that was digital. Digital was coming, and new digital cameras were starting to become pretty good. And also I had at that time, my family was starting to grow. And so the darkroom, which was the bathroom, had to basically close. So my background's engineering, so I thought, well, it's about time I sort of threw my hat in the digital thing. So I sold all my darkroom equipment, my enlargers, my timers, all these lovely bits of kit that I built up. I sold the lot and bought a large format printer and a large format scanner, and sort of threw myself into digital. And it was hard, really hard. I never really got comfortable with developing things in Photoshop that I would do in a darkroom, the manual process, which is so much fun. It's very physical, and you're creating something. But the weird thing is you're kind of creating something, and you can't see what you're creating until afterwards. You put it in the bath, and then the picture comes out. But you're sort of wafting bits of cardboard around and doing weird things in this dodging and burning. But the evidence of it doesn't come out until sometime later. So it's some kind of weird dance, it's sort of almost like a choreography. You sort of perform a dance and then you find out whether it was any good later. Eventually, things improved on the digital side of things, and in particular with Lightroom. Lightroom made a massive step, in my opinion, in change the way processing could be quicker and easier and more fluid and enjoyable. Not that I dislike Photoshop, I use it today, but it was never I never found it a really comfortable experience. Lightroom changed all of that. And, just my background of electronics and software and things like that, it was a sort of natural thing for me to get involved in editing and processing. But the reality is, with film, with black and white film, every picture was processed. Every picture was edited. You never printed the blank negative. You never just printed that. You always made a unique rendering of that negative each time you made it. And so in many ways, I don't find myself doing anything different with a computer. Every picture I look at is the starting point, and I work on that, and I enjoy working on it on the computer.
It's interesting you've brought that up, actually, because that was one thing I was gonna speak to you about, because there's some people out there who have this sort of impression that editing your images isn't real photography. They seem to think that we're manipulating things in some way, but it's great that you've actually brought that up, because it's so true. Because before digital, we were doing all of these processes physically in the darkroom, and we've now just kind of merged them now onto a more digital platform. And it's where most of the creativity comes from, isn't it? The creative process comes often in the editing.
I think so. I think there's a lot of bad vibes about the editing process, and it is interesting that if you think back, every black and white image was manipulated. These days, if you manipulate a color image, people say, "Oh, you photoshopped that," but they never say, "Oh, you darkroomed that." In actual fact, that's exactly what we used to do. Every picture was altered or changed in some way in the darkroom to achieve some kind of end. And I see no difference in the digital, really. There's definitely no badness about the fact that you've had to, or you've worked on it. A black and white image always needed that. So I think it's there's nothing wrong either way. I mean, if you enjoy being out in the field and using your camera and the craft of creating an image that has that's there and finished in camera, there's a beauty to that, and people really enjoy it. And I'm not suggesting that you shouldn't go that way, but for black and white, it's much harder to do that. Black and white, there are things that you simply can't do when you're capturing, and you do need to do those things later. And as a result, it's kind of an intimate part of the process. Equally, printing, the act of printing and what comes out of the printer, what we do in developing the picture largely sets the scene for what's going to come out of the printer.
And printing's a huge part of your work now. You do quite a lot of printing within your workshops, which is beautiful, because you're editing with your kind of clients and participants, and then they're getting to print one of their images at the end and really see it in print. And I have to be honest, printing's something that I very, very rarely have done, and it's something I'd like to get more into. I think it'd be quite interesting, actually, to kind of delve into the world of printing and what does printing give you, do you feel, as a photographer?
Oh, it's the natural end. Until you've got there, you haven't finished. It's still work in progress. The lifting up of the paper, the weight of the paper, the physical nature of it, the way that the light interacts with the image, you just cannot get that on a screen. You can't get it on a big screen. You can't get it on a small screen, on a tablet or whatever. There is something completely different about it. If I were to hand you 6 prints, and physical large, A3 plus A2 type prints, you would spend time looking at them. If I hand you an iPad, you'll go flick, 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 where's the next one? And the experience is completely different. The physical nature of the paper means that, for example, matte and texture and so on is presented in a way you can't present on a glossy screen, even on sometimes you can get computers with these sort of more matte screens. It is in no way represents the same outcome as you get with a piece of paper. So, and some people I'll come across say, well, I don't want to learn to print because I haven't got enough walls to put all the pictures on. And sure enough, you could put them in archive boxes and get them out on occasion, and that feels a bit of a shame. But at least they're physically there, and your kids and whatever might actually find those. They won't find the discs full of images, digital images. They'll be in the trash, but they might find some physical pictures. I think there's this in sort of 100 years' time, they'll look back on this area and say, well, this was the Dark Ages. There are no pictures from this time. What happened to them? There was this period beforehand where there were books and all sorts of wonderful things, and people kept physical photos of their families, and all of a sudden that stopped. And then maybe later on it'll come back, we'll see. But digital will, those images are going to be gone. And then so you can print them, you can put them in a box, and you can get them out and look at them. That's okay. But more recently we've got into bookmaking, and that's become, I think that, pandemic was a big source of people getting into making handmade books. People sort of were at home and started to get into that, and it's become a big thing. And a book is a fantastic thing to present images. So you might not have room on your walls for all of these pictures, but you can put them into a physical book, a handmade book, and that is a lovely thing. And you've always got a shelf space. There's always some room you can stick a little book. So again, printing makes that possible.
It's interesting. It's like trying to work out what kind of avenue works best for you in some ways. And it's like, we have always kind of seen for years, printing is like these physical prints that you put on your wall. And as you rightly say, a lot of people are like, well, I've got nowhere to store them, I've not got enough wall space, all that kind of stuff. But you're totally right there about the books. And the beautiful thing about books is that you can make them as small or as large as you kind of want to, as kind of handmade as you want to, or you can obviously go down the more kind of digital creating of books and getting them printed. And it's beautiful now because you do specific workshops, don't you, where you actually make the books with those who come along.
Yeah, so we do photo books. There's quite a lot of, some really good people out there who make books, who make handmade books, either from the idea of just blank papers and that you stick pictures in, but also some people are also doing them with, printing the pictures in. That's something we want to do, because that's where I come from. That's the printing of pictures is an important part of it. So my wife Claire and I have been working on workshops that bring those two skills together. So Claire's got sort of history in books and bookmaking, and her parents still own an antiquarian bookshop. So she's got a long history with books, and me much less so. But it's sort of come together. With the photography and the bookmaking has really come together. So finding ways that we can help people to come along, learn how to make something, and go away and be able to go and make loads of books for themselves. And it's wonderful to see what people get up to and what they post, and the imagination is amazing. I had no idea how many different ways you could make a photo book. It is stunning what people get up to. There's no end of inspiration out there on the internet to go out and play with. So we've been doing a lot of that, and it's become quite a large part of the workshops I've been doing in the last year or so.
I think I'm coming to realise now that photography, especially if you want to earn a living from photography, it's about creating some sort of experience for people. So whether it's taking them physically out into the field and having that time in nature and stuff, or whether it's creating these indoor workshops where we're almost kind of going back to that childlike play, aren't we, of looking at what we've created and then creating something from our creations and going home with something beautiful that we can look back on years down the line, and giving people that connection not just to their photography but to their creativity and also to others within the group, and being able to facilitate that. How does that kind of make you feel when you're hosting some of these workshops?
Oh, it's amazing. Yeah. So you're right. The bringing a group of people together who will have a different background, a different set of experiences, and they will make images in their own way. And when we come to do printing, that's transforms. Looking at the back of the camera and seeing a picture is one thing, and even possibly seeing something they've been editing on a laptop screen, maybe that's good too. But when you start churning out prints, so on almost every workshop I do now involves printing in some way or another. So what will happen is we'll start printing, and we might print 40 or 50 pictures, and amongst the group of people, there will be a whole lot of pictures that these people would never have seen. There'll be ways of capturing that they'll never have considered. And just by having all of these prints surrounding us, that's an inspiration. Most people go away from those workshops, not just with being pleased with their own output, but actually having picked up completely different ideas from other people in a really physical form. So my feeling is that, workshops, quite often photographic workshops, involve dashing around to multiple places, seeing some stuff, capturing them, going home with a card full of images. And then often either they don't get processed or they go off on the next trip before they can really understand what it is they've got. With the workshops that I'm doing, we prioritize that time in printing so that you go away with maybe half a dozen large prints of the experience you've had. And hopefully that will then inspire you to go back and work more with some of the other images that you caught up at that time. But if nothing else, you've got a physical memento, if you like, from that workshop, which I just think that's a much nicer way to finish a workshop than to go home with a card full of images.
It is interesting, actually, because I'm always thinking in my own workshops and my own experience, how can I add more of an experience, more of a memento, like you say, at the end? And I think a lot of people, when they do come on workshops, they want that time to reflect on their images, to share them with the group and all that kind of stuff. And it's about finding ways to integrate that into what you're doing. And definitely with what you do with the printing, it's amazing. And the fact that you are able to take your printer around with you to wherever you're going as well, and facilitate this.
Yes.
But yeah, of course, you have the experience of doing this over many, many years. And it's kind of just a kind of workflow that you've got into, which is it's so beautiful.
Yeah. It is interesting. It is something that has, as you say, has evolved. I was cursing my printer the other day. It almost let me down. It didn't in the end. It came good in the end. But I was thinking, I don't know, they should make these things more reliable. Anyway, I looked at the page count, and I've had it for 2 years, and it's done over 2,500 prints. And I think, actually, I was being a bit mean to it, poor thing. It's worked hard. And those will be A3 prints probably. So I print almost nothing but A3 on the workshops and so on. So that's a considerable amount of throughput. And when I thought about it, I thought, no, that can't be right. And I kind of worked the numbers out and worked out how many workshops we've done, how many prints we've done, and how many other things I've been doing in the background. Yeah, that's right. It's of that order. It's of thousands of prints. So probably about maybe certainly 500 to 1,000 prints a year. That's a possibility. So when you do that, you learn stuff. You make quite, there are going to be mistakes in there, quite a few mistakes in there, and each one of those mistakes is a learning opportunity. And whilst you might curse it at the moment, it's the best way to learn. The more you do, the more mistakes you make. I mean, there's a common saying, you've got to fail faster. Make more mistakes. If you don't make mistakes, you don't learn. Learning is through that process. So, you might be in a kind of high pressure workshop environment where you need to make stuff for people or get things out for people. And that's when the pressure's up. But that's when all of a sudden, a penny will drop about some small element of what you've kind of taken for granted. And you suddenly realize the significance of that one little thing, and it builds the big picture. And for me, I have to know how things work. I have to know. I can't be told, oh, you press this button, you press that button, and this happens. I go, why? What if I press that button? What if I do it this way? What will happen? And I just have to know. So I do that stuff all the time, and doing the workshops and trying new things like the bookmaking, for example. I mean, Claire, my wife, she kind of despairs at me. I'll say, well, why do I have to do it like this? What happens if I do it like that? And so I will make a book that fails, because I've gone literally against the grain. I'll have built it the wrong way. And she said, told you, whatever. But the reality is now I completely understand why I should have done it that way. And I'm not passing on rote. I'm not just saying, oh, you do it this way because everybody does it this way. I say, here's what happens if you don't do it the right way. And I can get out my book as evidence and say, well, that's what I did. And I won't do that again. But I learned from that. And now I can build on that solid foundation of knowledge and do something different.
It's interesting, isn't it? It's great that you're able to really dive into these things and test them out and see how they're going to work. And I totally agree with you there. That's something I say regularly on my YouTube channel. There's no such thing as mistakes in any aspect of life, but, particularly in a creative pursuit like something like photography, because if you don't try things, you're never going to know what does work. And actually, in some situations, what works in one situation isn't going to work in the next situation. And sometimes when you break the rules and try different things, you actually create something that you would never have created otherwise, which is always a really interesting thing to discover. So, yeah.
Totally agree. Yeah, I think for my black and white style, if you like, has come completely from that. I always loved the high impact, sort of high contrast black and white imagery when I was working with the darkroom, and I would always go for the high maximum contrast papers, and I would always be trying to achieve that really dark and moody look. When it came to digital, it didn't naturally give us that, and when you use your camera and you switch it to black and white, it doesn't give you that. It gives you grey, and I had to work at the processing techniques. And in fact, what I did was typical of me, is I just push everything all the way to the maximum 100%, and then I put another one on top and put that to 100%. And when I started to do that, I discovered how the digital images worked better and how they printed. And from that, I then sort of changed the way that I work. So it's almost, I had to go way beyond where the boundaries are, and understand how the images break, and from that then kind of build back to a point which I really like. So where the boundary is, what's good and what's not so good. But what really amazed me was I just kept making things darker and darker and blacker. And every time I did it, I thought, oh no, you can't do that. That's too much. And then every time I did it, I just thought, well, actually, I really like that. I really like, how much light do I need in this picture? How much white does it need to have? And it's amazing. I would look at a picture and then I go, I could go further with that. I could go further with that. And I kept going and I kept going. And I found myself way outside of what might be considered the norm. But I really love it. It does something for me, and it's a personal thing. And I guess everybody has to find where that limit is. For me, I'm not sure I've found that limit yet.
It's interesting photography, because I know I've experienced this a lot in my own journey. There's a lot of I maybe want to call it judgment in some ways of people saying we should do this and we shouldn't do that. But what I love in your creative process is that you're not afraid to push things to their limits and see what will this do. And it's almost like you can really feel and sense the joy in your voice and your whole body when you're speaking about, how you push these things around and experiment. Because that's, to me, what photography is all about. It's about finding your like you say, limitations, your niche, your creative flair, and you're just not afraid to just push things and find out what works for you. And I find that very inspiring.
Well, I think when I'm working with people, I realize that one of the things that I do, I subconsciously did it, and then I realized actively I'm doing, is I'm giving people permission to do the things that they probably wanted to do, but were worried that other people would think that wasn't the right way to go. And so usually what happens is with a workshop is we'll say, well, why don't you just push them all over to the right. Let's see what happens. And they go, are you sure? Is that okay? Well, let's see where it goes. And we all do that. And we'll go completely nuts with images and to the point where they are, they're completely broken, if you like. But usually at that moment, there'll be something that will pop out of that picture that was completely hidden prior to that violent change and massive manipulation. Something will pop out, and sometimes that becomes the image. This little element that was hidden in the shadows or hidden in the highlights often, that you couldn't see because it was covered with everything else. There'll be the small changes of tone or a little delicate shape will crop right in, and that becomes the image. And you would never have known that we would have gone that way. I was in London a couple of weeks ago, and we had bright sunny day, fantastic for black and white, harsh shadows, solid blacks, nightmare really, super maximum contrast. I love that. And we were down by the monument, and there's this lovely twisty stainless steel building that's opposite or adjacent to the monument, and it was super bright day, so all it looked like was very bright reflective stainless steel. I took a picture. And I had my phone with me, took my picture, and I dropped the exposure right the way down so that all we had was just a hint of the spirals. And it was absolutely beautiful. And what was not visible, even to the naked eye, became a really beautiful image in black and white because the way that the light was catching the curves was exquisite, but was completely drowned out by it being so bright. Your eyes couldn't assimilate all of that detail, and the camera wouldn't have captured that detail. So if you, by underexposing it massively, we were able to capture that. And I quickly posted one of those, and I got Mark Littlejohn came back and says, "Oh, it looks just like some kelp." I said, "Exactly. That was exactly why I posted it, actually, because I thought it reminded me of his lovely kelp pictures. It had just that lovely, beautiful shimmer and shine to it." So these things are often all around us, and most of our pictures contain those things, but we don't find them. We don't explore the images anywhere near the extent that we need to pull out these little beautiful elements within. Often the pictures are too big, they're too wide, they contain way too much information, and the beauty of them often is within little elements within those pictures. Because we capture, multi-mega, 20, 40, 60, 100 megapixel images, you can take the tiniest bit and make a picture from that and still print it, and it will still be good.
It's incredible. I think a few years ago, I went through a bit of a phase of cropping all of my images, but it really helped me develop as a photographer because, as you say, I was seeing all these smaller aspects and I was cutting out all of the distractions. And it's actually really helped my photography process now because now when I'm out, I'm not looking for these big scenes with loads going on. I'm seeing like 100 images in one photograph and I'm like delving into the smaller details. And I think that's one of the beauties as well of editing is that you can learn so much from it, and cropping particularly is great because not only does it help you to the images you've already taken to maybe stand out more, but it also helps you in moving forwards and working out what do I actually want to photograph and how can I actually tell the story I want to tell here and create the interest. It's fascinating, really fascinating.
It is, and often we're presented with quite scary situations where you're in a really beautiful location and you're stood there thinking, oh my goodness, if other people were stood here, they'd take a really, really wonderful picture, but I don't know how to do this. I'm completely overwhelmed by what's in front of me. Actually, that one of the things to do is to narrow down your vision and just say, well, okay, let's take that big vista view or that fabulous scene that's in front of us and have that in the bag, but then perhaps narrow down and just find some small element of what's there and focus in on that. And when we do that, sometimes that leads you down this little rabbit hole of, oh, that's interesting. I never noticed that because I was overwhelmed by the big picture. I never noticed that small detail. And then you start drilling in. I've seen that happen with lots of people. They're at the most amazing place. There was one client was telling me that she had gone to one of these fabulous, West Coast Scottish islands, and in a very well-known location, but actually never made it to the beach. She just spent the time taking a picture of the little river by the car park, and that's a great example. She got fascinated by something that was that caught her attention, and she drilled into that. She took the time to do that. It was fantastic. Actually, resulted in an exhibition for her, which is really a really good example of you can be overwhelmed by that big picture and that big location, but actually, if you are, maybe you just need to look at the small stuff around you.
Yeah, definitely. And of course, your interest predominantly lies in black and white photography. Do you ever do anything in color?
Oh yeah. And it is a slight worry to think that I might be pigeonholed as if you want to know something about black and white, you could talk to Adrian, but if you want to know about color, you have to go somewhere else. That would be a terrible thing to feel. I guess it's my personal work, and I'm also, to come back to a point you made a little earlier. I'm very fortunate actually because I don't make my income from selling my pictures. If I did, I might have to think a little bit about the craziness and the weirdness and stuff like that, because I'd have to have customers and I'd have to like it. So that's always a hard bit, and rather than do what I enjoy. So I do tend to my own personal work. I tend to focus in on black and white. It's just the way my brain works. I find that I can sort of lock into that. I see the world, I see the connections in black and white more easily than in color. It just always seemed to work for me more easily. If anything, it should be easier to do. There's less variables, but also you can have more fun with it. I think because, everybody knows that the world isn't black and white. When they see a black and white image, it's already a fake. It's already not real. So it kind of gives you permission to do things with it that you couldn't do with color. Color people get very upset when you start playing with it too much, taking it too far away. That it's photoshopped. It's becomes something other than photography. But I think in black and white, it's always been more acceptable to have fun with it, and so I really benefit from that. But yes, I do color. I mean, I'm using my phone a lot these days. Maybe half the pictures I take are taken on my phone, and the phone is pretty flexible because it can shoot black and white and color at the same time, and you can choose to use those images in lots of different ways. I find probably color images, I'm just more drawn to working with black and whites, but color present their own problems. So technically and in teaching and so on, I'm working quite a lot with color. Because there are particular problems for editing and printing that need special attention when you're starting to deal with color that you don't have to deal with in black and white. So it is part of my overall set. But for my own personal work, I tend to switch the camera to black and white, and it stays that way all day. And I just have fun in the most beautiful color locations. I'm shooting black and white, but you've still got a color raw file under there, so I can always hike out a color image. I was doing a black and white workshop here in the North Devon coast a few years ago, and we had the most amazing sunsets. And the clients that I had at the time, I could sort of see them sneakily changing their cameras back to color. I said, you don't need to do that. The raw file is color. You can always have the color picture later. But if you keep it in black and white, what will happen is your eye is drawn to the leading lines, to the compositional elements much more easily than when it's pumping out color at you.
You're really inspiring me, actually, because I don't do that much black and white photography. And when I do, I usually photograph in color and then convert to black and white and then edit it, in Lightroom. But now, I know. But I'm being really inspired by what you're saying now. We've got quite a changeable weekend ahead of us up here, weather-wise. And I'm thinking when the sun's out, I might actually go out, during the day and switch that camera to black and white and see what I can create. It would be quite an interesting YouTube video as well, I think. Something different for me.
Well, I like to say that every day is a black and white day, and some days are okay for colour.
Okay. Yeah,
there is no such thing as a bad day for black and white. I mean, honestly, there is no lighting situation that doesn't work for black and white. But for colour, you have problems at certain times of the day and certain conditions. Doesn't work. But black and white, there's never anything I can't get out of a picture. There's always something. So because it boils down to basics, it boils down to contrast, lines, form, patterns. They're always present, no matter what the lighting conditions. But the thing you have to do, though, Kim, is to switch your camera to black and white when you are shooting. Okay, yes. So you see the world. So you're not drawn away by this color rubbish. That you see contrast, line, form, texture, shapes. That's what you need. And then once you do that, once your eye is tuned to that, you'll look for it more, and it will help you with your color photography too. So it's a really good training tool. It's a really good learning tool. So yeah, I think if you're lucky enough to have a mirrorless camera, then looking through the viewfinder, the world is presented to you in black and white. But you do need to do a few things with the settings to make it look exciting and not just flat grey. So that's the sort of thing I teach people on in my workshops.
It's fascinating. I find photography, we're forever learning, forever growing. There's always new techniques, new things to learn. And I think I've just always been very drawn to colour. I love the vibrancy of the world, and I love sunrises and sunsets. But in the last sort of year or so, I have definitely been getting more into textures and patterns and finding photographic opportunities out with those optimum landscape photography times of day. So I'm loving this, actually, because like I said, I'm just finding it and inspiring me in my own journey, and I'm sure many other people that are listening to this as well. So.
Well, I really enjoy colour imagery and colour photographs. It's not that my world is black and white. I absolutely love it, and I love the work of other photographers. I mean, my inspiration, my really photographic inspiration was Joe Cornish. He was the person that spoke to me visually when I was kind of at the right time for me. and he got me into it. And I tried to be Joe Cornish for 15, 20 years really badly. So the color image is all around us, and I love it. But when I'm shooting, I find that I'm drawn to black and white. But yeah, I'm sure I'd be just amazed at all the pictures that people are creating these days in color. They are beautiful. So I get that. It's not that I don't get that. I just find that I can shoot black and white.
So do you get out much, to do your own photographic work? Because of course, you spend a lot of time teaching and things and doing all your editing work. So do you get much time to go out and explore this world for yourself?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think I, like many other people who teach in this area, are probably all going, I wish we had more time to do our own work. Nowhere near enough. And the last year or two has been absolutely crazy. I'm doing maybe 10 to 15, maybe 15 to 20 multi-day workshops a year. And then online Zoom training, of course, is a large part of what I do as well. And then the one-to-one. So by the time you look at the diary, the month has gone by and there's not even an hour slot. It is quite crazy, but that's what I need to do. I definitely need to get back into more shooting for myself. I just think it's a problem for anybody who's working in this industry, and I'm sure you know what I mean, Kim, that you're trying to build your business on the one hand, and you can't say no, because you don't know what might happen next month. It's a really, any self-employed person knows, it's really hard to turn anything down. So you do things, and then when you look back, you realize that actually maybe you should have said no, because it was okay in the end. But it's unpredictable. And if you're still in a full-time job and it's paying for your photography, that's great. Take those, use the cash you're making to buy your holidays and take the camera away with you. That's really good. But it's very hard for us to make those spaces in time. But you have to, otherwise you go mad. I think I'm seeing and hearing other professionals who are having the same battle. And I guess everyone finds their own answer to that. But it is a difficult balance.
It is. I think everyone, no matter what they do in life, finds it difficult to balance work and their kind of what they love. And
yeah,
I think for some reason, creativity and artistic sort of things always seem to take a kind of back burner when we're doing other things in life. But I think I'm coming to realise now it's so important to make time for our own creativity, because it's how we channel so much, not only our creativity, but it's how we can look at our emotions and see the world around us and get that release and that kind of step away from the normal day-to-day stresses. So yeah,
definitely. I had a proper job for just over 30 years, and managing people, doing digital electronics, designing products and things like that. And it always, in my head, I always sort of kind of rationalized it. Said, well, my day job is order, planning, design, regular, this sort of thing. And my hobbies are the opposite. They're the creative things, and they're having fun and being chaotic. And actually, it wasn't until I left my proper job that I suddenly realized that actually none of that was true. My real skill is innovation or improvisation. That's my real skill. And it's the only skill I have. And so in my work day job, I did kind of plan, but when things didn't happen or went in the wrong direction, I would always have a fabulous off-the-cuff reason for why that happened. People thought, that's really good that you planned it that way. That was. I realised I never had any real skills in proper organising, planning. It was always on the hoof, improvising. And so chaos and managing chaos and being involved in chaos seems to be something I've spent my whole life doing.
Yeah, it's funny. We all seem to kind of navigate towards these different things, don't we? And have our own kind of ways of dealing with things naturally.
Yeah.
So I guess one kind of final avenue to maybe go down is when you are doing your own photography work, what sort of subjects do you feel most connected to when you're out with your camera?
That's a really good question, because I've been trying to understand that myself. What the hell am I doing? Why am I pointing my camera and taking that picture? Lots of it is about exploring, I suppose. The common theme might be trying to explore, but actually architectural photography is the one thing that I love, say, what's your happy place? What would your happy place be? And some people might say, oh, we're lying on a beach with a cocktail. Yeah, okay, I could do that. But apart from that, photographically, wandering around Berlin with my camera shooting in black and white with a super wide angle lens on, and it'd be a bit grey and miserable day. That would be fantastic. Stock bits of concrete and slabs and angular bits and pieces of geometry. Yeah, I really am very happy in that situation. I really love that situation. I was wandering around London before a workshop and came across an area that I'd not come across before, just on the edge of the Barbican, and I'd not been there before, and it was amazing. And I just in that moment was completely absorbed by these simple lines and structures and so on. And that's it. I love that in black and white. It has to be black and white. Those things often don't work in colour. They're a bit grimy, a bit mucky. There's a bit of litter around, and all doesn't look very nice in colour. But actually, in black and white, it just is fabulous. And so those kinds of things work. Bright, harsh light, harsh black shadows, things like that. I'll find myself pointing the camera at the shadow line that's going across the pavement, and just, I don't know why, I'll take that picture. It just, in my head, it seems to make sense. If I try to sort of decompose that, I don't know why I do it. It's just, my camera seems to want to point itself to these things. Equally, I'd stick on a super wide 12mm lens and have almost the whole world in the viewfinder. I absolutely love that, and it simplifies the view. It's a strange opposite to what a lot of people are trying to do. In simplifying views, often you have to go narrow and to exclude things and cut things out by going to a narrower field of view. What I've found is that I can have almost a similar but opposite with a very wide field of view, and it pushes everything further away from the camera. Everything is boiled down to much simpler shapes rather than lots of detail. So it actually works extremely well for what I'm doing, and I'll use that for architectural, which is natural in a city where things are very close to you and you need to get a bit of space to be able to capture anything. Super wide's good for that, but also in landscapes, I'll very often take that lens with me, and the sort of conventional wisdom is, we've got to have something in the foreground, middle, and distance. Well, I mean, that's just convention, right? So we don't do convention. We point it at anything, and see what happens. And when we come back and look at those pictures, particularly in black and white, where we remove that color confusion and simplify it down to the basic elements that are in the picture, actually that can work extremely well. So I do like to do that. I'll go out and shoot out of focus. I'll go and point the camera at the sun, and whatever. Just having fun, really. And when I then look at the pictures that are working, there must be a thread. There must be something that links them. I couldn't say what it is, and it's not about the object or subject. So it's not specifically landscape or buildings or people or grasses or whatever. There is something about each of those things that works. There's a common element, but it's not visual probably, or there's something else about it that makes me do it. It's contrast. There's something it's something about the lights and darks that adds up. And if we put all of these pictures down on the light box, you go, oh yeah, I can feel there's something connecting them. But I couldn't say you are an X, Y, or a Z type photographer.
It's interesting because it almost sounds like a lot of your interests are quite linked to engineering in some ways, the architecture and the lines, and there seems to be a little bit of a connection there, linked to where you kind of have come from.
That's very insightful, Kim. I think you are right, and it took me a very long time to make that connection. So the people that I love, the photographers that I say that I was brought up with, people like Joe's pictures, they were intuitively beautiful, and I didn't know how to make them because my brain doesn't work that way. I'm not that kind of a person. So I would shoot lines and geometry and then go, oh, why am I doing lines and geometry again? That's rubbish. And I would constantly be rejecting that kind of work in favor of trying to make beautiful, chaotic, creative, beautiful images. But my brain doesn't do that. My brain does my brain does geometry. And all of a sudden I thought, well, why don't I just do that then? And I think what happened in the early days of my photography is I would be entering pictures into competitions, and I would be winning the competitions in the stuff I thought I was rubbish at, and failing miserably at landscape. I'd never get anywhere with landscape pictures, and I was so frustrated about that. And I think somebody said, you're really good at this other stuff. I said, no, I'm not. That's just, I just threw that in because I happened to have that picture around and I put it in, They said, no, you need to pay attention to this. This is important, and you're not giving it airtime. Actually, not everybody does that. And then it started to make sense to me. So, well, actually, it does kind of come naturally to me, but things that come naturally to you, you might be actually quite good at. Mm. So, and this is something I see in clients all the time, is they will think they want to be like somebody else, but actually they have a skill in something they are discounting. So they're naturally good at something. Because they're naturally good at it, they give it no credit. Mm. So they'll kind of try not to do that because that comes easily. They'll instead try and do something that's hard to do and spend their entire lives battling to become something they aren't. And actually, it takes a mirror to show them that they actually have genuine skill and ability and creativity that other people don't have, that they're squandering, and that they should try perhaps to do a little bit more of that. And that comes naturally, and that's where the sort of feedback loop will then help them to improve and change and get better at that particular skill set they have.
Yeah, that's a really interesting thing there, because I think we're all naturally born with certain gifts and talents or ways of seeing the world. And like you say, we kind of spend our whole life battling with trying to be something we're not, either because of kind of judgment or fears, or because we feel this is how we should be, rather than just accepting who we are and what we're interested in. And I love that. It's a really almost deep philosophical thing there for people to think about at the end of this, because yeah, I think the more true we are to ourselves and what we're naturally drawn to and naturally kind of good at, then the more, like you say, we can develop it, and it's definitely well worth developing. So that was beautiful words there, Adrian. Thank you.
I've never had anybody say deep and philosophical about anything I've ever said. It's just rambling. I don't know. I can't make the words go together. But yeah, I see amazing, talented people who don't see it for themselves. And I think that's common in all walks of life. I've had people work with me, engineers who are unbelievably talented at certain things, but they just don't accept it themselves and try to do other things and try to, the classic is you send somebody on a course for something because they're rubbish at it, and they continue to be rubbish at it. You've just wasted your money on a course. If you actually sent them on a course that they're really good at, the thing they're really good at, and make them even better at, they'll be happier and even better. Get someone else to do that stuff that they couldn't do. That's the way to do it, and focus people on the stuff they're great at, and just accept the fact that we can't be brilliant at everything.
Yes, totally agree. Brilliant. Yeah, I love that. No, I think it'll maybe help people think a little bit as well about who they are and what they're naturally good at, and try and delve into that a bit further to discover themselves more. So, because it's very clear in your work that you do that. You've kind of gone through the whole remit of trying different things, and now you kind of understand, okay, I enjoy this. This is why I enjoy it. And you kind of consciously, do that, and also bring it out in other people, bring out their natural gifts, their natural talents, and give them, like you say, the mirror, but also the support and the guidance, the acceptance, just to be them in their creative photography ventures, which is beautiful. If you
come with me, I will. Yeah, you have permission to do anything you want. And I will then prompt you to do stuff even more chaotic and madder than you've already done. We'll see where that leads. I think that's the place to go.
Brilliant. It's all about just being messy and creative and seeing what happens, which is fantastic.
Absolutely.
And on that note, if anybody would like to come and work with you or connect with you or see anything that you do, where would be the best places to find you?
Well, my website is probably the first stopping point. So on there you'll find everything from kind of 1 hour, 1-to-1 sessions, which I do to help people when they've got things they know they need help with. But I also do like Zoom workshops for Lightroom, Photoshop, Wix, Nick Collection, a gazillion different sort of segments, and they're really good value because you're doing it in a small group, sort of 5, 6, 7, 8 people maximum. You get a recording and all that stuff, so you learn together, and it's quite an easy thing to do. You don't have to travel anywhere, so that's also very nice these days. And then proper multi-day face-to-face type workshops for just my own ones, but also I work and have worked with Light and Land for 16 years now, doing workshops for them. Also for Dawn to Dusk, and I work a lot with Paul Sanders and Rachel Talibar in particular. Over the last 5 or 6 years, Rachel and I have been working together for doing print workshops and various other creative development type workshops as well. So there's way too many ways of getting in touch with me, actually. So the problem I have is now that once people realise also I can solve their techie problems too, I'm sort of number one technical support as well, which is starting to become an issue. There are so many technical problems in the world.
Yeah, so particularly when it comes to using things like cameras and computers and printers, and so much can go wrong with technology, can't it?
Yes.
It's good to have somebody like you around who may be able to guide people. So
yes.
Yeah, brilliant. Well, thank you so much for your time today, Adrian. It's been an absolute pleasure to reconnect with you.
Oh, that was lovely. Thank you, Kim.
Thank you so much for taking the time to listen to this week's podcast. It really does mean the world to me. If you'd like to get further involved with the Photographic Connections community, including taking part in our monthly photography challenges and accessing our monthly teaching webinar, head over to photographicconnections.com for full details. And now that this podcast has come to an end, there's only one thing left for you to do. It's time to pick up your camera and head outdoors. There's so many incredible photographic opportunities just waiting for you to discover.